Good evening, everybody. My name is Tal Schnell. I'm here with Lead with Giants TV. Our guest tonight is Karin Hurt. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Great, and we're delighted to have you. Karin Hurt is the author of Overcoming the Imperfect Boss. This is a great relationship for our working relationship with our managers who lead us every day. So we'll look forward to an interesting, very engaging discussion here on the Lead with Giants TV. Let's go around the room and introduce everybody. We'll start off with Barry.
Yeah, this is Barry Smith with Building What Matters, coming to you from Gresham, Oregon.
Great, we're glad to have you. Welcome to our show.
Thanks, Tal.
And next we've got Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz Stinselli with Stinselli Advisors, coming to you from Salt Lake City, Utah.
All right, glad to have you here. This is going to be really fun because I know a lot of people, actually this morning I've heard a lot of good feedback actually on Facebook from just presenting your book, and it's going to be a discussion about those relationships they're always looking forward to. Everybody has their own personal take about it. But I know for you, Karin, you had an experience that you were about to give actually a motivational speech in front of many people on a day that you had an imperfect boss. Tell us about that experience. How did you feel?
Yeah, so it was interesting. I was leading at a large call center. I was director of a large call center, and we were going through a big audit that was part of our certification process for a big certification that you get in the telecommunications world. And my boss came in, and she was not local, so she was visiting from out of town, and she came in and she noticed one thing, one like little administrative mistake that somebody had made. And it sort of went ballistic, and it's outside of my office, sort of making a scene, and I just basically said to her, I apologize for the situation, but I've got to go give this motivational speech right now. Don't do this to me right now, because if I let her impact me, then I would be impacting hundreds of people. And so basically I said, I'm happy to talk to you about this later, but for now I got to go. And it was interesting because I don't think she was accustomed to people really standing up to themselves like that, because she watched me do this speech. She realized in the grand scheme of everything that we were doing, that little nit was not a big deal. We passed the audit with flying colors. We ended up being certified. It was fine. And we never revisited the situation. But that was a shift in our relationship. And ever since that time, we never had another episode like that again. So I think that is, I think it's important. I mean, you don't want to accuse, you want to own it. But I think it's also important to make sure that you maintain your own boundaries for how do you need to be an effective leader, and not letting other people, even if it's your boss, impact your ability to lead your team.
What I really thought was interesting is that you acknowledged how she felt and you owned it, like you said, but you acknowledged that there was a sense of emotional frustration. There was a mistake, obviously. It was corrected, but you connected on that level of saying, I'm sorry. You acknowledged that relationship. I think those are the two important words in any relationship. You should just say, I'm sorry. And the other person is somewhat diffused. So I thought that was your empathy in that case.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. I'm glad that was a good example. Thanks.
Great.
Karin, kind of along with that, can you talk a little bit about how, as bosses, we can help our employees feel comfortable coming to us and talking to us about how they perceive us as a boss, and if we are being a bad boss?
Yeah, Liz, I think that's a really good question, because you can't do it all of the sudden, right? I think that sometimes people try that, and they've been a certain way, and they've been a very a top-down kind of boss, and all of a sudden they ask for feedback. And once a year, or as things are coming up, or if they've gotten some negative feedback in a 360, and you can't do it that way. I really believe it has to be along the way, and it has to be gentle, and it has to be, I think, to start at least in one-on-one situations, so that people can feel very comfortable giving the feedback. I believe that that's really important to build the foundation, because when the going gets really tough and your team really has something to say, it may be a point that you're not even seeing your blind spots and you're not asking for it. And if you've laid a foundation of trust, then your team will approach you and give you that feedback even when you don't ask for it. So that's why I think it's so important to ask for it along the way. From time to time, I've also left my team in a room with a whiteboard and magic markers and said, go for it. Tell me what I need, what I'm not hearing. And do it anonymously and have one person, give the feedback for the group, and then let's talk about it. And I found that works okay, too, if you need to. But I've done that earlier in my career, but I think now I'm more in the sense of let's get a funnel going all the time so I'm getting the feedback going. But that's an easy way to start if you want to come out of the gate and you haven't ever done it before.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, great question, Liz, and a great answer, Karen, for sure. So let's look at it from kind of the different side for a second. And that's from those working underneath that boss, because one of the things that I've seen quite often, and it just spreads like wildfire, is when there's that incident, not much different than the one you just described, Karen. But then the individual that kind of got victimized, I guess, for lack of a better word, by the boss, takes an attitude and words and actions and behavior to their coworkers, and then it's like a recipe for disaster. So, what are some good ways we can encourage, I guess, ourselves if we're in that position, or even our coworkers, to kind of bring a better attitude, a more positive attitude, and try and be part of the the solution instead of the problem?
Yeah, that's such a good example, because the easiest thing to do when you've got a bad boss is to commiserate with your peers and talk about the jerk, right?
Exactly.
And that feels cathartic for a minute, but I think what you really need to understand is that is undermining your credibility as an employee and as a leader too, right? Because then you are, as you indicate, part of the problem. So I would say that, if you've got a jerky boss, the first thing I would say is don't become a jerk yourself, and don't do other behaviors that you think that you wouldn't normally do. Don't let them bring out the worst in you. If you're not normally a gossip, don't let this jerky boss make you a gossip. If you're not somebody that is vindictive, then don't become vindictive. If you're not somebody that normally gets stressed out and takes it all out on your family, and all of these things I've seen happen, right, is that people let the stress from a bad boss relationship permeate and destroy other relationships in their lives. And at that point, then they are now the problem, and they are the jerk, right? So I think that's part of it. And so I would really encourage you. I'm a big believer, and I say this throughout the book, is take it offline with your boss and talk about it in a non-defensive way, and deal with it one-on-one, and resist the urge, no matter how good it may feel, to talk about it with your peers. If you have to talk about it with your family, my poor family has heard stories, right? After all those years. But you find another way to vent, or a friend that's not part of the company to vent and get it out, so that you can come back and be your best self at work.
No, I love that response, because it reminds me that when and if we do kind of follow suit with that behavior, we're really following that example when we should be leading, and then take that leadership role, even if we're not the leader on our business card or on our on the door to our office. We don't need those things to lead. So thanks, Karen. Great answer.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you something that happened to me recently in our organization, and wanted to ask you a question is, how do you support a manager who is not supported by upper management in the company? How do you support your manager if they are in that situation?
Oh, wow, that's a tough one.
It's a real life story, so I'm curious to find out what's your take on it.
Before I could answer that, the first question I would ask is, and maybe you can make up, make it up. But why are they not being supportive? I mean, why are they not being supported? Are they not being supported because of political reasons, or that they're not being supported because they're not competent? Because I think the answer differs depending on where that lack of support is coming from. So I guess, can you give me a little more?
Yeah, sure, and I'm glad you're asking. It's more from a competence. We had someone who's very looking at the resume, looking at the references, looking at the paperwork before the person arrives and the qualifications for the job. They were there, but it seems like the adaptability to the management company expectations of someone in that position seems to be a bit overwhelming, and he seems to get lost there for a while, and so now it's noticeable, and you sense, no one has directly said, but you sense certain things that says that someone above him is not really supporting him in so many ways, in a subtle way. And so you're seeing it from that perspective. How do you the approach is obviously to support your manager regardless of where they are in the organization. If they, so you can be there for them. But is there another approach that you would advise?
Yeah, so I would say the first thing I would do is not be part of the crucifying team.
Mm-hmm.
Know that it will take care. If the guy's really incompetent, it will take care of itself. It really will. It sounds like if they already are noticing, then they're already noticing, and let that play out if that's what needs to happen. But in the meantime, the first thing I would do is do whatever I can to support my boss. Help him navigate the politics.
Right.
Help him figure out what needs to be done. Help him make relationships with peers, right? Do everything you can to be a peer mentor to your boss in this case. Right? So that would be the first thing. And then the next thing I would say is also make sure that concurrently with that, you're building your relationships with other people. So you have you build a very strong peer mentor relationship. So you're working very closely with your peers. You have sponsors beyond your boss within the organization. And resist the urge to say, I need you because this guy is incompetent. Always take the high road. But just find ways to really expand your network. And I talk in my book about how to deal with a disengaged boss, and I think a lot of the same behaviors apply, which is do the best you can to help, but at the same time do kind of a surround so that you're not getting lost in that sauce or being labeled with that incompetence.
Right. Well, let's pick up on that on a second segment. So we'll go ahead and conclude here. So we had a great discussion, and we'll come back on a second segment. Just stay with us for now for a second here.